Hey, what's up? Hello, everyone. Welcome into Fantasy Filmball, the show where we turn movies into sports and sports into something we don't talk about here. My name is Matt.
My name is Dyl, and we're back again with another What Have We Been Watching here on the channel, this time for the month of February. So if you're a new viewer here, consider dropping a subscription, a like, a comment. It keeps you engaged with everything that we're doing here because we have some more episodes revolving around Best Picture nominees as well as our final Oscar predictions. But Matt, month of February, kind of a stinker, wasn't it?
Well, I actually saw someone online ran the numbers, and they went through every month in history on Metacritic, looked at the films that released in that month, and did an average of the scores. And it turns out February of 2024 has the lowest average critic score of any month in the history of motion pictures. That's crazy. Now, granted, Metacritic is not really an all-encompassing database because those critic scores are only being added starting like the late 90s, early 2000s. And before that, it's reissues, re-releases, so you don't get the full picture. But still, it's at least the worst month in like 20 years. I haven't been to the theater much. I know you've definitely taken a few unfortunate trips out to the theater. But we're not going to talk about that first because we're going to quickly touch on what everyone wants to know, which is the one big good movie that it had a showing this month, but for the most part, it is considered a March release, and that is Dune Part 2. And sorry to disappoint you, we're really not going to talk about Dune Part 2 on this video because we're going to be doing a full other video where we're going to deep dive into everything about Dune. We're going to talk spoilers over there. We're not going to get into that now, but if you want to see that, watch out for our channel. We are going to be talking Dune Part 2 a lot more in the coming weeks.
But we did both go back to the theater to watch Dune during its limited re-engagement here about like 2 weeks ago. And I guess first things I want to say is, Paul, you're not that special. You don't have to stunt so much. I dream of Channy every night as well, so that doesn't make you the end-all be-all, but in preparation for Dune Part 2, of course I had to return to Part 1. It's my favorite film of 2021, and I adore Denis Villeneuve's take on the source material. While I had not read the book, I still had a fair knowledge of what Dune was about. You want to bet your ass that this movie still holds up because, of course, all the production elements are amazing. The colors of the cinematography that correlate to what planet you're currently on. The production design is so grand. The costumes are varied. The dresses and gown that Lady Jessica wears are beautiful, but I really dug the designs for the still suits that the Fremen wear. Some of the military outfits that the fighters rock are so well crafted. And you know what? If I had $300 to spend, I would buy a still suit replica to wear to see Dune Part 2. But
I saw someone doing that.
They're a little too pricey for me to buy it for a one-time use. But the makeup work on the Harkonnens is so well done. It's part of the reason why I think Dune Part 2 could be up for Best Makeup and Hairstyling at the Oscars this next year because it'll be more heavily focused and went throughout the film. And then don't get me started on Hans Zimmer's score, GOAT status. The ensemble here is also well cast. Timothée Chalamet channels this energy as Paul. Oscar Isaac soars as Duke Leto. Rebecca Ferguson deserved that Oscar nomination for Lady Jessica. And then people in very small roles like Jason Momoa steal the show. Dave Bautista, Josh Brolin, Javier Bardem, Stellan Skarsgård, Sharon Duncan Brewster, and Zendaya are just so perfect in their respective roles. And for the ones that are coming back for Dune Part 2, can't wait to see how those characters grow. And I just can't wait to talk about this film in more detail.
So I actually didn't get out to the theater to see Dune Part 1. I bought the 4K to watch it at home because I wanted to own it. You can see I like owning movies. When I love a movie, I want to have it, and I wanted to have Dune. This is my fourth time seeing Dune, and actually this week I undertook the task, a little bit of a fool's errand, but I actually did complete it, so I'm very proud of myself. But on last Sunday, I was like, I wonder if I can read all of Frank Herbert's Dune between now and next Sunday when I see the movie at the early access fan screening. I was like, okay, well, it's an 850-page book, so that's a lot of reading, and I have 6 days. Well, I did it, and it was exhausting, but I did do it. I gotta say, after reading the book, this is one of the best adaptations of all time. Every change made from page to screen benefits the story, tells the story better. With both Dune and Lord of the Rings, what those filmmakers and those teams bring to life, I think is beyond even your wildest imagination, your wildest dreams. This film is stunningly crafted, and it is a perfect adaptation. Now, when I first saw Dune back at TIFF in 2021, I was a little disappointed. I'd been told Dune was the next coming of Lord of the Rings. I'd been told it was Game of Thrones in space, and that's not really what that film was. It's building a world. This is a movie where for 2 hours and 40 minutes, we're watching Denis Villeneuve set up dominoes one by one by one. It's a lot more fun to watch those dominoes fall than it is to watch them be set up. But the first film is incredible. But again, it's just a teaser of what's going to come next, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Another movie I saw that was in re-release for this past month is filled of perfect quotes, and that is Christopher Nolan's magnum opus, not Oppenheimer, Tenet, because don't try to understand it, feel it. These words perfectly describe how viewers should open themselves up to this masterpiece. Honestly, I could just rave about Tenet for like 5 minutes, but I'm not going to do that. What I would suggest everyone out there to do is just go to Twitter, go to YouTube, just look up Tenet memes. It's filled with them. That's what I'm so happy about with this re-release is the Tenet craze is back. Everyone's got Tenet fever. You open up Twitter, all you see is Tenet memes. It's the order my hot sauce an hour ago. It's how to pull off a temporal pincer movement. There's just so many, and I'm glad that more people are coming around to realize that Tenet is a great movie, because I've been on this for like 4 years now. 2020 came like Tenet deserves Best Picture. Didn't really get that many Oscar love, but hey, Nolan's time is coming here soon. This was my first ever film in 70mm. I will say, wasn't all that special. Didn't really notice that much different from like watching a movie in Dolby or in IMAX, but it was cool to be like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing a movie on this giant ass screen.
70mm, 35mm. I'm gonna upset some people here saying this. I think it is a novelty like vinyl records that died out for a reason and is being brought back for nostalgia and being propped up as the only proper way that you can see a movie, when really all that I find is added from screening a film in 35mm or 70mm is the flickering. There's some texture that comes with the film, some imperfections. It's a fun experience to go out and see a movie in that format, but it is by no means the best way to watch it, especially with a modern blockbuster. You want the flawless picture, you want the flawless sound. I'm definitely going to anger some people saying that, but I prefer filming on film and screening on digital. That's the best situation for me. I'm unfortunately not as big a fan of Tenet as you. We've been over that before. I do need to give it a rewatch with subtitles on my TV. I saw it twice in theaters, and I couldn't understand shit.
I don't have that issue. When I saw Tenet the other day, could perfectly hear when they say we live in a twilight world and all the exposition like this, and when they're on the little boat with Kenneth Branagh, Elizabeth Debicki, I could hear that dialogue fine over the waves. Yeah, it's not clear as day. Maybe that was a positive watching in the IMAX location, but I would agree 70mm is probably not the way I'm going to go in the future, but if I can see a movie in IMAX or Dolby, that will probably be my preferred method.
It can be a great novelty, especially for a film that you love this much, but I know I'm never going to go out of my way on a first watch of a film to see it on film. I will do it for subsequent viewings because it gives character, it gives a new take on the film, a new flavor, but it's not necessary. It's not the be-all, end-all. In preparation to watch Dune and Dune Part 2, I rewatched Arrival, Denis Villeneuve's masterpiece, one of the best sci-fi movies of all time, in my opinion, and a film that so beautifully uses language, cinematic language, to tell the story. Even though it's a film about communication, it doesn't need all the words in the world. It is not a dialogue-heavy script, and in fact, it makes an argument that language can be visual. This film is stunning. I cry at the beginning, I cry at the end, I cry at the middle. I think this is a perfectly emotional film. It's a tragedy about how, if we were to be able to see into the future, would we have the power to stop what we see? Because if we were able to stop what we see, then it wouldn't really be the future, would it? And this is a theme that I think permeates through Denis Villeneuve's work, especially the Dune movies. Are we powerless to our fate? I was really struck by the production design on this time. There's this moment at the beginning where they're in the helicopter and you see the crowd of cars below them on this farmer's field, and then you see this fog just looming over the green fields before the egg. It turns this farmer's field into what looks like an alien world, and it's magnificent. That is cinema. That moment, my lord, I love this movie.
So we just talked about some movies that we really do like, but we mentioned at the top of this episode, February 2024 is a stinker, and I saw 5 new films this year to add to my list that I don't know if I can say I would recommend watching any of these 5 movies, so we're gonna have a little bit of a lightning round where I blow through 5 films in terms of best to worst from 2024. Up first,
Yikes.
Argylle. Great film? No. Great time? The first time, haven't thought about this movie since February 1st when I saw it, but I did enjoy sitting there watching it. Ever since I saw the first trailer for Matthew Vaughn's newest offering, it seemed up my alley. All-star cast, grand-looking costumes, a fun premise, pretty cool-looking action scenes. I was sold. However, we saw this trailer 50, 60, 70 times in front of every movie you saw for the last few months. That definitely kept sending down my anticipation for this film until it was all the way at the bottom. I think the opening of this movie could be its own spin-off little mini-series. This is what was my favorite part of the film. I love the dynamic between Henry Cavill's agent, his foe of Dua Lipa, and his comrade of John Cena. The VFX in this sequence are very, very wonky, but the campness, the sexual aura, the comedy was just working for me. Then we transition to the actual film. This follows Bryce Dallas Howard, a novelist, and her quest. This part was nowhere near as engaging for me, but we see the inclusion of Sam Rockwell, who's really funny in this role, and he's doing everything he can to make Argylle an enjoyable time. This movie holds no punches back. It full sends it for the last 30 minutes, which really doesn't work for me, but I have to admire the swing. Like I said, this movie has a ton of issues. I did enjoy it on my first viewing, have yet to think about it since, so I'm gonna give this, I guess, a 5 out of 10, but that might be being a little too generous. But Matt, you also saw Argylle. Are you any higher than me, or are you even lower?
I think I'm about the same. It's not that bad. There's some fun moments scattered throughout, but it's really dumb. And if you know that it's really dumb going into it, you can still have a good time. I like Kingsman: The Secret Service. I have not seen the follow-up Kingsman movies. I'm no Matthew Vaughn connoisseur, but the thing that I liked about Kingsman: The Secret Service, the thing that I liked about Kick-Ass, was how cartoonish the violence was, how over the top all of it is. It feels like it's ripped out of a comic book. The thing holding back Argylle the most, or at least one of the things holding back Argylle the most, is that the PG-13 rating and the way that it tones down the violence, it really neuters the cartoonishness of the story and cartoonishness of the film, and that silliness, the ridiculousness of all of these plot elements, the stupidity of some of the things that it does throughout, doesn't play as well. Since it's not as cartoonish in the violence, suddenly you take things a little bit more seriously, and it feels in earnest like it's trying to be a spy movie, rather than trying to be a parody or a pastiche or a send-up of the genre. If it had been a bit more cartoonish, the purposeful silliness, the ridiculousness of some of the plot twists on plot twists on plot twists would have played a lot better. But yeah, some of that stuff is just so dumb, but those aren't my biggest problems with it. My big issue is you can just feel the corporate hand of Apple at play, where they're like, oh, what if we used a Beatles song here? Even though it makes no sense for the movie, we have the money to do it. Why not do it? We can, so we will. It's things like that, while at the same time they're doing the corporate money-saving stuff, like every single element of this movie, except the actors, being CGI. Like, they're on sets that are so clearly that LED screen used in the Batman, used in the Mandalorian, and they're just standing in front of it the whole time. There's just no interaction with the background, no interaction with anything, and it just looks so fake because it is fake. It's all fake. It's just they're saving money wherever they can. Same with, like, have they ever seen a cat? That CGI cat does not look like a cat. Just get a goddamn cat. Maybe they're saving money or saving time by not having a cat, because cats are impossible to direct. Like, I've got 2 of them sleeping over here that would not do what I say no matter what. But at the same time, it looks terrible, and it's the like, let's fix it in post, let's make it as fake as we can attitude that permeates so much studio filmmaking nowadays, and it's lazy. I appreciate that we're getting a big budget original film. It's not based on an IP, at least not until the very fucking end when the credits roll, and then suddenly it's like, oh, guess what, we're tying this into the Kingsman universe. Fuck off, Matthew Vaughn. Fuck off.
That Kingsman tie-in did drop at a whole star rating for me,
Same
so
here.
that very much negated my interest. But one other thing I did like about Argylle before I moved to the next film is that sequence where they're having that fight on the train that's in the trailer, of how it cut between Sam Rockwell and the agent Argylle, Henry Cavill. I thought was really creative and very fun, and I wish we got more of that throughout the rest of the film. Speaking of something I wish I got more in, was Bob Marley, One Love. This feels like just one very long second act. This movie opens up with title cards that kind of tell you about what Bob Marley is, who he is, what his life has been for the first 20 or so years of his life. Then we get into what the plot of this film is. The movie ends, and then we get closing credits about what the rest of his life is like. It's just like one mini story that makes no sense why this is our focal point, because they hint at stuff from before, they hint at stuff after, but they never actually do anything with it. We sit in this area for the whole hour 40, and this film feels so much longer than an hour 40, and as soon as we get to this concept at the end, which feels like it should be this magnum conclusion like Bohemian Rhapsody, boom, closing title cards, movie over. Kingsley Ben-Adir's good as Bob Marley, but they do nothing to make me care, be engaged, or anything like that. But I will say, I guess it did its job, because after watching this film, I did go to the I.S.S album and hit play for my car drive home. So I guess Bob Marley, One Love got me to do one thing in the positive. But yeah, this would just be a bland 4. There's no incompetence with the filmmaking, but there's nothing special. Ronaldo Marcus Green is not the worst director. I love King Richard. Joe Bell has its moments, but One Love just feels like, let's do the least amount of work and see if we can get by.
I don't like music biopics, and I do like the fact that this one doesn't seem like it's trying to tell the full life of Bob Marley, but what you're saying is, like, it does with the title cards. And at that point, like, just make a Wikipedia biopic. If what you really want is a womb to tomb, then just do it.
It is a Wikipedia biopic movie in terms of the creation of Exodus, the album, and One Love, the song. It just tries to tell the rest of his life inside of these 3 years of Bob Marley's career. The next film I watched felt very long, even though I had a short time as well, because I love Ethan Coen, I love buddy comedy road trip movies, and I love Margaret Qualley, so you would expect me to love Driveway Dolls, but boy, did I think this was a stinker. I looked at my phone, and this is something I never do during movies, but I looked at my phone just like, oh yeah, we're like an hour in, the movie's almost over, right? It's been 15 minutes. So,
oh my God.
I knew I was in for a treat for the rest of this film. It feels like just like one SNL skit that's just so prolonged that it loses any steam by the time we get to something that's actually interesting. Margaret Qualley has her moments in this film, but her country accent she's doing is not like Mark Ruffalo's in Poor Things. It's not something that you can like laugh with. You're like laughing at, and it's so like detrimental to this plot, you just very much just like don't care anymore. And I think the big reveal of what's in the briefcase is funny, but what they do with it is very underwhelming and just feels like, oh, what's the first thought? Let's do this. Let's end the movie right after we do this. And Focus Features delayed this movie due to the strikes, which makes no sense because this seems like the perfect film just to dump on streaming when people can't promote it. And you can be like, oh yeah, that's why the movie flopped, because they saved it and then exactly did that same thing. They didn't promote it and they just let the movie flop.
I'm still very excited to see this one, but I hear what you're saying. I just love the Coen brothers so much that I'm willing to give it the benefit of the doubt. I do plan to see this very soon, and I'll have to let you know what my thoughts are on it, because I'm hoping that I like it a lot more than you do.
I hope you do too, because it seems like most people are between like a 5 and a 7. I just seem to be a lot lower. Maybe it's because I went in with giant expectations. I also love the Coen brothers. I love Tragedy Macbeth. When the other Coen brother went out on his solo path, so I'm like, oh yeah, let's see what Ethan's got. And did not really like what Ethan had. Speaking of not liking stuff, I also saw I.S.S, which I will just say up front is a 1 out of 10.
Whoa.
I could try to be like witty, I could try to be smart with a review, but I think the best thing just to do is memes, because that's what this movie is. So we know the BAFTA performance by Aaron DeBose. So, the Russians did the thing. Aaron DeBose is my woman king. Messina Chris, he's a genius. Thriller sci-fi, you're ISS. This film was super boring. This film is a mess. The crowd is snoring. House of Regal, the cringe is strong. Be true to you. You can't go wrong. ISS, get it out of here. Nothing even remotely interesting to say about it, because on the opposite side, Madame Web is as low as you want to give a movie, but there is so much to say about this movie. It's not the Cats of the superhero genre, it's just Madame Web. There's so many angles you can go about saying why this is a bad movie. There's also that debate online, should you really be trashing bad movies? ADR is a huge issue with this film. Tahar Rahim's an actor I like. Mauritanian, great. Napoleon, he's not doing much, but I like that movie. He always is in stuff that I usually like. I don't believe any line of dialogue he says in this movie is in the clip that we're watching on screen. I don't know what the decision was here. Did he have a different accent at the beginning? Did they just like a different line reading better? But Ezekiel's character is not speaking while we're watching him speak. Or he is speaking and there's no audio coming from his mouth. Don't get the decision, but I love it. I love it. Madame Web also feels like it was written by some Spider-Man nerds who have no experience in script writing. They're just like, oh yeah, how can we throw in references to Spider-Man 04 and The Amazing Spider-Man and No Way Home? Like, haha, this is so cool, right? And it makes no sense ever. I can't blame any of the actresses here, because when you're giving nothing subsequent to say, how can you make it sound good? Dakota Johnson seems like she's talking to a wall the whole time, but who knows? Maybe that's how she was directed to talk. The one positive I would give for Madame Web is the three young actresses are showing chemistry. They do have some good laughs throughout, but this movie is 2 hours and 10 minutes. Why? my enjoyness of like It's So Bad, So Good ended about 5 or 10 minutes in, and then I was like, oh, there's still like another hour 50 here. The blatant product placement of Pepsi is awful. In the trailers, it shows this Pepsi sign that's breaking down in the climax of this movie. Madame Web has a vision that she sees the Pepsi sign's S fall and crash and kill Ezekiel. In the movie, the S is not the letter that falls to crash and kill Ezekiel. So I think that just shows the competence of filmmaking here.
Oh man, I think the debate is less whether we should not trash bad movies and more where the blame should be. What I would say is it's fine to trash Madame Web, but put the blame on the corporation, not on the director, who is very early career, was definitely manipulated. It is still possible that S.J. Clarkson could make a good movie in the future. The terrible thing that corporations are doing with their big budget flops right now is they are bringing on promising young directors and then changing their vision because they know that this director is not in a position to say no. They're not in a position to say, I don't want to do that, because then they'll say, oh, well, do you want this job? You have to listen to us. You have to do what we say. And then in the end, the director gets blamed for it anyways. It's perfectly okay to talk about how bad a film like Madame Web is, just as long as the blame is not on the creative, but instead on the suits that mandated the film to be this way. So I'm going to talk very quickly about some of my new release watches. I have not been out to the theaters much this month. I've been staying at home for the most part. There hasn't been a whole lot drawing me out to the theaters. On Netflix, I checked out Orion and the Dark, the new animated film written by Charlie Kaufman, one of my favorite writers of all time. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, masterpiece. Anomalisa, masterpiece. Adaptation, masterpiece. Charlie Kaufman hits on all cylinders all the time. Synecdoche, New York. How did I forget that one? Incredible stuff. And Ride in the Dark, you kind of wonder, how is this a Charlie Kaufman movie? It's a cute little film about a kid who is visited by the spirits of the nighttime. And it feels like a Pixar movie in how we have this personification of the things that go bump in the night and the darkness and dreams, all of those different things. We've seen that formula. But then like maybe 20-30 minutes from the end, I was like, oh, so that's why this is a Charlie Kaufman movie. It gets weird and it stays weird, but what I liked about this film is how it talked about stories that we tell and how we pass things down from generation to generation. The anxiety that we feel as kids is likely going to be the same anxiety that our kids feel later. And the stories that we're told as kids are going to be the stories that we tell our own children. So it's about family, it's about how things are passed down, and it's about the things that always are going to resonate with us. A fear of the dark. It's always going to be a thing that hangs over humanity and hangs over generation to generation. I watched Echo on Disney Plus, the MCU series, and I'm just going to say right away, this is the worst thing that Marvel has ever done. I have a problem with the Disney Plus MCU shows, which is that apart from She-Hulk and WandaVision, not a single one of them feels like it is meant to be a TV show. They all feel like they are movies that have been added with like 45 minutes to an hour of filler and then cut into 5 parts and put into this platform. There's no character development. There's nothing of consequence. There's no stakes. Nothing is interesting about this story. I've already forgotten all about it. I can barely speak about it. This is it's terrible. Also, I rewatched The Color Purple, and I had initially given this a 10 out of 10 despite the flaws that I felt with it. It was so emotional, it was so beautiful and impactful that it just hit me in the right way. But on a rewatch, the flaws are definitely a lot more apparent. They're definitely bugging me a lot more. I can't ignore them the way that I did on a first watch. And so I will be dropping this one down to an 8 out of 10. I still really enjoy this, and what I think I appreciate the most is how it subverts the trauma of the story. While Spielberg's version leaned into the horrible things that happen to Celie and to everyone in the story, this version, the musical, leans into the beauty of the world. If we don't stop and appreciate The Color Purple, that feels like, it's an affront to God, because The Color Purple is beautiful, and it's the optimism, the kindness, the way that it views the world through this hopeful lens. I think it's beautiful. But yeah, more flaws this time.
Yeah, I had rewatched Color Purple back in January, and I don't think I really commented here, but I kind of went the same. I think I originally gave it a strong 8, and I dropped it to a solid 7, but for basically the same reasons. But Matt, you've watched a lot of random stuff this month, so let's get the fan favorite segment back, Matt Speed Round.
Random watches. I started off with a film that I'm still watching. This is known as one of the greatest films of all time, but it's a fucking mini series. You are lying, greatest films of all time list. It's called Berlin Alexanderplatz, directed by Rainer Werner Fassbinder, a great German director of the 1980s. And this is a 15-part miniseries. It is over 15 hours long. I have one episode left of this behemoth of a show. But yes, it's fine. It's well made. The music is good. The main character is a piece of trash, real piece of work. But this film definitely has some interesting things to say about redemption. Can people be redeemed? I just don't think it needed to be 15 hours long. I have lost interest on multiple occasions, and actually it's taken me so long to watch it because I try to watch like 2 episodes a night. A lot of the time I'm falling asleep during it and then having to rewatch those episodes the next day. I've been watching this basically all month long, and it is a little exhausting. If you're really into art house cinema, this seems like people say it's essential. I don't know if I would agree. If you wanted to get into Rainer Werner Fassbinder, just watch Ali Fear Eats the Soul. Watch The Bitter Tears of Petra von Kant. I think those films are much, much stronger than Berlin Alexanderplatz, and they won't take 15 to 16 hours of your goddamn life. Anyways, some other films that I watched this month. Bull Durham. This is incredible. Have you seen Bull Durham, Dylan?
I had. Big baseball guy in my youth.
Thank God. Thank God, because I am also a big baseball guy. I know we don't talk about sports here. I love baseball. I'd never seen Bull Durham, despite owning the Blu-ray for the past, 6 years. I was given it as a gift, and I'd just never seen the movie. I didn't really know what to expect, but I did watch White Men Can't Jump a few months ago, and I thought it was fucking fantastic. And then I learned this is the same director, and I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm really excited now. And this one I actually liked even more than White Man Can't Jump. It's hilarious, it's touching, the jokes land so well, and what makes this movie work is that even though it's a baseball movie, even though it's a sports movie, it's not really about the sports. Everything important happens outside of the games. It's about reckoning with your place in the world as everything you've known your entire life is fading away from you. What do you do when your time as an athlete is done? Do you mentor, or do you retreat into bitterness? I also rewatched American History X, a film that I know a lot of people really love. And on a first watch, I think I watched this in high school. I'd only seen it one time, and in high school I was kind of on the fence about it. I thought Edward Norton was really good, but I didn't know how to feel. Watching it again, Now I get why I didn't know how to feel. I think this movie is kind of straight up racist. Is a movie really successfully anti-racist if racists constantly cite it as the movie that put them onto those ideals? Because what this film does is it lets Edward Norton's character talk and talk and talk and say all of these racist fallacies, and it never once challenges him. It never once says, this is why this character is wrong. Never. Not one time does it say he is wrong about this. Instead, it says, hate is not a good thing to hold in your heart. Hate is a heavy burden. That is not the message that you should be giving. The message you should be giving is, here is why this guy is full of shit. This is wrong. These are lies. But instead of doing that, it takes the easy road to say, we should just be nicer to each other. Oversimplification, and it gives a platform to racist talking points. Not a fan of American History X. I also rewatched Pickpocket, a Robert Bresson movie, which is a masterpiece of the 1950s. And despite this being an art house film from an art house filmmaker, it is really entertaining to watch. It's only 70 minutes long, and it breezes by. It's this crime thriller movie about someone who ends up climbing the ranks of the crime world as he learns how to be a pickpocket and enters into a crime ring, taking wallets from people at racetracks. It balances perfectly between being an art house film and being really easy to watch, really accessible. Anyone could watch this. I watched Fatal Attraction as well, the 1980s film starring Glenn Close, and if Glenn Close was ever snubbed for an Oscar win for anything, it was for this movie. This is one of the strangest Best Picture nominations of all time. It feels like the type of movie that if it was a book, you would be ashamed to be reading it. You would have another cover over it to be like, to hide that you're reading a little bit of smut. It's that vibe, and to see that type of movie nominated for Best Picture in the 1980s, it's wild. Hope and Glory was another one I watched, which is another Best Picture movie from the 1980s. And I want to apologize to Alfonso Cuarón for ever saying that Belfast was Kenneth Branagh's Roma, because it's not. It's Kenneth Branagh's Hope and Glory, because this movie is, it's a biopic of the director of the movie, talking about his childhood in Britain during a time of war. Hope and Glory is really sweet. It's very fun. If you like Belfast, you would love Hope and Glory. And finally, Lethal Weapon is the last one I'll talk about. I'd never seen this movie before, but I'd heard so much about it, and I think this one is great. This is what every single action movie now, I'd say, is indebted to, because for so long, action and comedy were two entirely separate genres. You couldn't be an action hero and be making quips left, right, and center. Even Die Hard, there's still an air of seriousness over that, even though at times there are these great quotables. Lethal Weapon is a full-on comedy. They are quipping all the time, and that's what every action movie has become now. There's always that, even in the most serious action movies, there is so much humor in those films, and Lethal Weapon started that. I would say might be actually the most influential blockbuster of the late 1980s, and I think it's great. It's definitely been done better since then, but it is the original. That's not everything I watched this month. You can check my Letterboxd page for more stuff, but those are just the highlights. Those are the things that I have stuff to say about.
Well, the month of March should be a better month for cinema than what February was. I mean, we have Dune Part 2 coming up. I'm sure Matt has a lot of fun rewatches from older films coming up, and then not in the big film releases, but still some new stuff coming out the theaters that may end up surprising us a little bit more than stuff like One Love or Driveway Dolls or I.S.S. or Madam Web were for the month of February. But as always, if you're new here, consider a like, a subscription, a comment. It helps us out, keeps you engaged, and I mean, you made it this far in the video. But until next time, my name's Dyl.
And my name is Matt, and this has been Fantasy Filmball.